and welcome you all to today's economic development session with the Middleton Chamber. I just want to welcome you guys all to this session. Thank you for taking time out of your schedules to join us, and highlight our sponsors here listed on the screen. We are doing these meetings virtually, but their support still means a lot to the Chamber, and we really appreciate them being a part of this program. So up first today, we are going to have, there we go, an update from our friend, Mark Opitz, who is the Assistant Planning Director for the City of Middleton. So Mark, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm filling in for Abby today as she is taking a few well-deserved days off. I'll start by announcing how City Hall is going to be welcoming visitors again as we phase into a reopening. Currently, we're only accepting appointments, but as of July 6th, we are planning to reopen City Hall. We have plexiglass shields in place at counters. We'll have other precautions like sanitizing stations and floor markings to emphasize physical distancing, which we all have seen at various businesses. City staff are currently and will be required to wear masks when having in-person meetings, and we ask our customers to bring their own as well. Next, I wanted to give you a few updates on projects. Recently, I'll start with last night. We had the Pleasant View Park project that has been discussed now for about half a year. Was originally a 14-story and then it became a 12-story residential building right at the golf course entrance, if you will, on top of the hill of Pleasant View Road. The Planning Commission had conceptually endorsed the project last week, but last night the City Council voted to not support the project. There's discomfort by a few council members. Actually, it was a 6-to-1 vote to not endorse the project in its current form for various reasons. Working, I guess, north from there or east to north, the Newcomb development, the Plan Commission approved a specific implementation plan for a new 100,000 square foot office building. It's going to be on the site of the former Marriott surplus parking lot, John Q. Hammonds and Holiday Avenue. We're really happy that they are siting their building in this location. North to downtown, we have the Middleton Center Phase 3. You've probably all seen that on Terrace Avenue between the tracks and Terrace. The site was leveled a few months ago, and then they took a pause, and now they have they're intending to move forward again. T-Wall Enterprises, 2 residential buildings. They have an early start permit, and so I'm not sure exactly on the timing of when they start, but we heard it's very soon. Continuing further north, we have the Conservancy Bend project, also a T-Wall development, 87 apartments, 19 townhomes, right by the roundabout at Parmenter Street, just north of Paul's. There's a big hole there, so they're getting ready. In fact, I think they've started pouring foundations to develop the apartment building, and then the townhomes next to the Conservancy. That concept was approved by the city, but there may be the developers interested in some potential changes to that concept. So there's some discussions going on with the city about that. But currently it's approved for 19 townhomes. What else do I have? North of that, what's called the Trotta, the apartments, 100 and, I don't remember the units, 124 units, I believe it is. Yeah, 124 units, 4-story building. It's going to be one of the larger buildings in the city. It's almost 500 feet long, north of the Villumsons site, or my favorite reference point is Culver's. So across the street from Culver's, that site of the former Colonial Motel, next to Good Neighbor. So between Villumsons and Good Neighbor Liquor. So that's a 4-story residential apartment building that's going to be built by Impact 7. Michael Carlson is the lead on that. Other than that, I guess would be remiss if I didn't mention the airport, since I had a request for that. Master plan for the airport continues. It was kind of at a standstill much of the last year because the FAA last August provided some feedback on the aviation forecast chapter that Mead and Hunt had drafted, and they wanted to see some changes and some improvements to it, so going back to revisit some of the data. And so that chapter has now been revised. There's still a couple little issues that need Hunt is addressing based on FAA review. What I will say is that their projection, according to the latest chapter, is that the current 100 planes that we have based at the airport would increase to 125 planes over the next 20 years. A lot of people ask me about jets all the time. We currently have 9 takeoffs and landings on average a week at the airport, and that would be projected over the next 20 years to double. So 18 a week, which is 2.5, 3 a day, basically. We are committed, as we have said all along, to do a community survey as we wrap up the planning process before we adopt the master plan. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is the state of Wisconsin's We're All In small business grant program, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. It's $2,500 emergency support grant funded through the Federal CARES Act for up to 30,000 Wisconsin businesses. The timeline for application is very tight. The deadline is next Tuesday at midnight. So at the end of day Tuesday is the application deadline. And they do need an email or letter of support from a local community organization. I know the Chamber has prepared a number of letters already helping local businesses. And the city administrator, Mike Davis, has also offered to help and is the contact for the city. I can also use a local financial institution or trade organization. Somehow certify that the business was was open in February of 2020. And that's through the WEDC.org website. And again, Kristen, I'm sure sent that out to people, right? So that link is out there.
Yep.
That's what I have. Any quick questions? I don't want to cut into your speaker too much. No questions?
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
I appreciate you being here.
Sure. Thanks for the youthful photo.
That's what LinkedIn's for. Actually, it might have been the city website. With that, I would like to turn it over to Aina Villumsons. I think I hopefully said her name right. She is the CEO of the Wisconsin Procurement Institute, and she is our main speaker today. So Aina, I would love to turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you for having me today. Next slide. Just a little bit about us. Our mission is to work with businesses in the state of Wisconsin, especially with a focus on small business, to help them increase their sales, revenues, and jobs through sales to the federal, state, and local governments. We do this by providing individual counseling, small group training, and conferences. Conferences right now are kind of at a standstill, so we're going virtual on much of our stuff, but last year, we did over 100 events throughout the state of Wisconsin and worked with over 1,200 companies. So we have offices here in Milwaukee, Madison, Camp Douglas, Stevens Point, Fox Valley area, and Door County. We're funded by the Defense Logistics Agency, which is part of the Department of Defense. We've been in business for almost 35 years. And our matching funds come from WEDC and other funding partners. Next slide. Want to share our website. Information, educational, what's coming up, contacts to work with us. Just wanted to share that. It's wispro.org, Wisconsin Procurement Institute. What we are is a Procurement Technical Assistance Center. You'll see that in the logo. There's a Procurement Technical Assistance Center in every state in the country, and Guam and a couple other areas. So our group focuses on Wisconsin businesses and giving benefit to Wisconsin businesses, bringing money back into the state. Next slide. So just to give a little highlight on, the title of this is, making money and the world's largest market and all this stuff. What I want to start with is really at the bottom of the slide. Through all the COVID, through all the issues we've been facing lately, the government has not stopped buying. As a matter of fact, they increased their purchasing. So those that were originally in the market when all this started have continued working. New contractors have come into play, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. Wisconsin last year took in $6 billion in federal contracts out of the $600 billion marketplace. Last year, the state of Wisconsin spent about $3 billion. That includes UWM, WisDOT, and all the support agencies. Then if you have the purchasing from the 72 counties, the municipalities, airports, and all the other states, it really is the world's largest market. And the government continues to spend money. I hate to say it as a taxpayer, but as someone who wants to sell and make money and have a good counter-cyclical customer, the government is a good customer. Not for everybody, but a good customer for those that can work with the requirements of the government. Next slide. So what I usually start by when I talk to groups is the basic culture of the government marketplace is not that of the commercial marketplace. For one, there has to be a need. The government must need something or have a problem or have some requirement in order for them to want what you have. And number two, they have to have the money to buy it. If they don't have the money, they can't buy it whether they need it or not. We saw a lot of that through the COVID. Things had to wait. You know, money got moved from this place to that place. We see it with the border wall, money, you know, all the controversy with money moving around. It's one of the basic premises of government. If there's no allocated funds, nothing can be spent. It's also a very difficult master. It's always the government's way. If they want it this way, that's the way you got to do it. Commercials, a little more lenient, negotiated, a little softer. Also in the government, the business must follow the processes that are required. You can't just, again, back to do it your way. It's very regimented. It's got standards that are a little more rigid. If you're working in the defense, a lot more rigid. If you're working with municipalities, a little less rigid. Government can also be very intrusive and demanding. Okay, if you're a defense contractor, let's say, and they want to walk in and see how you're making their parts, they do that. If they want to see your financials, potentially they can do that. If they want to interview your staff, they potentially can do that. Again, depending on the agency, the circumstance. But as someone gets into the government market, that's one of those elements they need to consider. Also, a lot of the company's information becomes public. So if I'm selling on a government catalog, like a General Services Administration schedule, all my pricing is public. That might be a good strategy, might be a bad strategy, but anytime you start doing business with the government, more information becomes public and the government does become a little more intrusive into your business. It keeps some people out of this market altogether. Others, it's just part of how you do business. Next slide. What the government also looks for is a strong back room. So if you're going to bid on $1 million contract that's going to take 10 people and you are the only employee, that usually doesn't go well. So they will look for that you are strong, that you have capacity, and that you can build capacity if you need to. Also, of recent, over the last couple of years, cybersecurity has become critical to contractors. You probably read a lot about this now, again, since the COVID, a lot more people working at home. Our home security is not the same as our office security. If you're in the defense world, it takes a whole different element of seriousness, and it's going to be becoming more and more serious. I'm sure some of you too have read the articles on what's happening with China right now and how Navy ships are being hacked and how, you know, personnel records are being hacked of the government. So this has become, if you're going to be working in the government space, cyber and security of your information is going to be critical. Also, relationships are important. Past performance is important, and financial stability. You need to know your customers. You need to know who you're working with. You also need to have a good track record. In today's environment, we can find out the good and the bad about pretty much anybody. And we're going to tend to do business with those that have good track records and good past performance. The government collects that information and it's easily available. So businesses, as they get into this, need to make sure that they're doing the best job they can and that their past performance is good. The last point that we, counseling all these companies over the years, is they don't have to buy from you. You might think you have the best thing. You might think that they're fools not to do it the way you want it, but they don't have to do anything. They're the government. So just keep that in mind. Again, they're in a very powerful position when it comes to procurement. Next slide. So like some recent needs, we were talking about the government needs to fund it. What have we seen over the last few months? Those that were able to supply masks, shields, sanitizers had business. They made sales. They're also the government's looking at building modifications for health and security reasons. Technology has higher dollars on it now. Part of it we talked to, people are working at home. The government has to fund parts of that. They're looking at funding the webinars, just like what we're doing right now. How can they have their meetings virtually? How can they, have audiences of 500, 1,000 people on a call? All of that is they're looking for suppliers. They're looking for people that can support office and work at home related goods and services. For example, the government has bought a lot more laptops than they used to because their staff didn't need that type of hardware when they worked in the office. So you're seeing a lot of that purchased. Janitorial and cleaning right now. With the health concerns right now, there's a significant market for anyone that can do janitorial, cleaning, sanitizing, a lot of the more significant type of cleaning and that type of work, there's a need. Medical, the testing, and the support for all that. We're seeing a lot of dollars going into construction in general. We're seeing money going into the military supply chain on the manufacturing side. And just as a side note, we've been doing a lot of work with hotels in the state because the hotels are accommodating the National Guard that's been issued to support the National Guard, both from riots and the COVID requirements right now. Next slide. So just wanted to share, we're not always thought of as a heavy defense state, but we kind of are. We're becoming more and more of a defense state. Some of you may have read about the large award that went to Marinette Marine for the new frigate contract. Those are significant dollars and significant jobs. That was just awarded this spring. Some of you may be aware of Oshkosh Defense and all the work they do on the JLTVs. They just got a trailer contract announced yesterday. A lot of manufacturing and a lot of support work comes through them, through the subcontractors. Also, what I did is I listed some of the large contractors in the state of Wisconsin. Of course, Oshkosh is first. Logistics Health is second through La Crosse. They do a medical work. GE Electric doing the medical equipment out of Waukesha here. Krieger International is the furniture manufacturer out of Green Bay, large federal dollars, and then it goes down the list. WPS Health Insurance, Goodwill Industries, IDS Holdings is Snap-on Tools. So Wisconsin has quite a few significant contractors, again, totaling about $6 billion last year. Next slide. So also wanted to share that we sometimes think we don't have a military presence here in the state. Well, we kind of do, or a federal presence, we kind of do. We have Volk Field and Fort McCoy in the center of the state. Madison, of course, has the 115th Fighter Wing, and they were awarded the contract for the F-35 training not too long ago. That's already showing procurements on the construction side on the base. We also have Oxford Prison. We have the Department of Interior. We have the Forest Service. We have large federal lands in northern Wisconsin. We have the 128th Refueling Group out of Milwaukee. So, and we have the VA hospitals that purchase out of Milwaukee for the state of Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, and northern Illinois. So there's a lot of procurement opportunities with agencies here in the state of Wisconsin for federal contracting. Next slide. Wanted to share too, sometimes we think the federal market is all big dollars, big companies, and the Oshkoshes and WPSs that I mentioned earlier. Since October, these are the top 20 new contractors in the state of Wisconsin. You'll see that they're all over the state. Some of the dollars are larger, some are smaller. You'll see Green Bay, Kenosha, Solon Springs is up in Douglas County. Chautauqua is a northern. County, so we see a lot of food on here. We see some construction, we see some technology. So again, very broad needs, very broad capabilities. So if you look at like the bases I mentioned at Volkfield or Fort McCoy, things such as lawn mowing, you know, snow plowing are opportunities, right? It's not all just the big hardware and the big construction projects. So again, these are all, you know, Sassy Cow Creamery, who would think? Next slide. So oftentimes small businesses also think they don't have a chance because they are small. For the federal government, small businesses have a preference. Small businesses in general are less than 500 to 1,000 employees. I know that doesn't sound very small, but or less than, you know, $7 to $25 million if it's revenue based. So the construction, some of this is more revenue based, manufacturing is more employee based. So you're not talking teeny weeny here sometimes, but it's still, there's a preference. So of all federal sales, 23% must go to small business at a minimum. And the government does meet those goals. 5% needs to go to small disadvantaged businesses, and that includes minority businesses. So there's a goal, a hard goal of 5%. 5% must go to women-owned businesses. The government is not meeting their women-owned business goals. So women, you know, if you know of women-owned businesses and there's a potential, they're solid, they have some track record, work in some of the, you know, technology, construction, professional services, there's significant opportunity right now. 3% must go to service disabled veteran-owned businesses. So, and in addition, anything that's sold to the VA hospitals, there's a preference for service disabled and veteran-owned businesses. Their goals are much higher. They look at, I think last year they were over 40% of all their work went to service disabled and veteran-owned businesses. And then 3% must go to hub zones, which are areas, county or census tracts throughout the state that meet certain unemployment and personal income levels. So they're not meeting that goal either. So companies that could qualify for the hub zone certification, they're only at about 1.5% now. They've got a long way to go, and they're looking for companies that could meet that criteria. But not only does the federal government directly look for this, any large federal contractor must also meet these goals. So the Oshkoshes, the GEs, the Johnson Controls, all those companies we saw on that list that are large contractors with large contracts must also work with small businesses. And the government takes this pretty seriously. It's not a, you know, totally hard, but it's a serious requirement. And they work very hard to meet these goals. And they hold their contractors, their large federal contractors, to these goals. If the contractors do not meet their goals, they can ding them on their next their next proposal. They can potentially find, you know, there's consequences. So it's very serious, and there's significant preference for the small businesses that are capable of doing this type of work. Next slide. So the state of Wisconsin also has some programs for minority businesses and disabled veteran-owned businesses. There's some preference. Their goals are not as hard as those on the federal marketplace. They do not look at the small businesses, only the minority and the veteran, service disabled veteran. In addition, the Department of Transportation also has what's called a DBE program, a Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, that looks at women and minority certifications, qualifiers, and they would get preference on transportation, certain transportation contracts. So again, definite benefit if you're in those spaces. Then we look at the city of Madison, Dane County, Milwaukee County, MMSD, and other local programs in the Madison, Milwaukee areas also have small business and preference programs. So any business that's looking at working with these areas should really take a look at, is there some benefit that they can gain by going after these certifications and understanding how to leverage the asset of their ownership. So next slide. So on the federal side, basically, if someone's going to start working on the federal space, they need to register. And the basic registration is what's called sam.gov. Basically what this does is you enter your DUNS number, you get the IRS checks you out, you're basically vetted on the back end to make sure that you are vetted to be a potential contractor to the federal government. In addition, some of the prime contractors are requiring that you register in SAM, like Oshkosh Defense is one of them. They expect you to be in the SAM system for you to work with them. Why? Because SAM asks you questions like, are you a woman-owned business? You're attesting and certifying to pages and pages of questions, and the prime contractors are reliant on your answers to those questions. Need to be honest here. So in addition, if you're a small business, you register in what's called a dynamic small business search. That's hosted by the Small Business Administration. And I cut and pasted a little piece of a search that I did for the Madison area of some of the companies that are registered there. Why is this important? In addition, for one, SAM is how you get paid. So if you get a government contract, that's where your banking information is. That's where your small business qualifications are. So if you're a woman-owned business, you would say yes, tick it off in there. It asks your NAICS codes. Are you small? Are you not? Those types of questions. So if I'm a government agency, or if I'm a large prime contractor like a Lockheed or a Woodward or any of these guys, this is where I go look for my subcontractors and my suppliers, okay? So this is all free. You register in here for free. We very much encourage, we've seen a lot of independent companies approaching small businesses, charging as much as $10,000 to help them get into these systems. There's no charge to get into these. A person can do it by themselves. We help people do it. There's no cost to entering the government marketplaces. In addition, I put up the beta.sam.gov site. The government has a site where the companies can start looking for opportunities on what the government is buying now. We also host a bid match service where we scrape the system and send out emails to contractors or potential contractors to see what's being purchased out there. Next slide. If you're looking at the state market, you need to register in the state system. Entry point of vendornet.wisconsin.gov, and their system of locating and searching and registering is called eSupplier. eSupplier has, over the last couple of years, become a more robust system where they also list a lot of the municipalities, counties, and other opportunities outside of just the state of Wisconsin. So if someone's looking at the smaller buys, that's where they should go, okay? Facilities and construction are bought separately in the state of Wisconsin through their facilities department. That's treated a little bit differently, and that's a whole nother webinar. But this, like I said, state of Wisconsin, again, if you want to look for opportunities and get engaged, you need to get into these systems and register. Next, and again, there's no cost to any of this, okay? Now, if I'm the government and I want to find sources, or I'm a large prime contractor and I want to find sources, a business needs to be very aware of how they're being seen, okay? So one, we talked about they need to register, and if it's appropriate, get certified. So if I'm a woman-owned business that provides IT services, I would take a look at making sure I'm in those systems, you know, as potential for the market. I would take a look at the woman-owned business certifications and possibly go through with that process. Again, that gives me an edge in the marketplace, okay? Second, what we see a big deficiency on is small businesses and their websites. If I'm looking up somebody, what's the first thing I do? I go to their website, okay? For one, if they don't have one, they've lost me already, okay? If I go to a website and the last entry is in 1996, I really doubt, you know, I'm kind of questioning if they're still around. So with today's technology, websites are not $50,000 a pop. They can be done for free. I mean, at least a static website with current contact information, some basic information is invaluable to a business. We all do it. If we want to find out about someone, we look, okay? We look for their website. If we want to find out about an individual, where do we go? We go to LinkedIn. See if they're there. If they're not there, well, you know, if you're anybody, you're in LinkedIn. So social media now has crept in to be a significant way of gaining visibility, whether the individual leadership or the company. You know, LinkedIn again is more business-based, Twitter a little bit, and whatever else is appropriate for the industry. But it's very important to be able to be found, to be seen, and to be currently seen in a professional manner. Fourth, we still see businesses that don't have business cards, and it's in these days you really do need a business card. If not, again, hopefully we'll all be touching we'll all have interaction in the soon. Don't know when, but soon. It's very important that mechanism is in place for small businesses. And I'll show a couple pictures later. Capability statement. What the government and these large companies want is not portfolios, is not binders. They want a one-piece, concise, one-page. This is who we are, giving me the information that I need. Okay. Also, companies should be prepared to discuss what they do. So if I ask someone, so what does your company do? They don't come with the answer of, what do you want? Or, you know, we've been in business for 30 years and go into a half-hour spiel. They need to be tight. They need to know what they're selling. Also, currently too, what we see very valuable for a lot of small businesses is that they can be found on searches, that, you know, if they're published, if they speak, if they present, that gives them value in the marketplace and gives them a legitimacy to those looking for them. Next slide. So I just wanted to give examples of business cards. Oftentimes when people go into the government market, they're adding things to their business cards that you normally would not in the commercial marketplace. So we suggest to people they have multiple personalities. They have a commercial personality and they have a government personality. So on a government card, you would put, if you're a woman-owned business, on a commercial card, you may not, you know, depending on, again, who you're selling to. On a government card, you would put your NAICS codes. You might put your DUNS number. You would not, you know, you might be a member of the Society of American Military Engineers. You may not want to share that in your commercial space, but in the government space, that might have value if you're in construction. Okay, you're a member of this national organization and that's one of your networking outlets. Also, you know, if you have a GSA schedule, anything that works in the government space. So just added a few examples. Next page. Then also the capability statement. And some people, you know, I'll have people come to the office and want to talk about how they can get into this. They'll bring a binder still, a 3-ring binder with their capabilities or a folder with 12 pages in it. I don't want to see it. I want to see you do the work, you consolidate it, you tell me how much experience do you have? What do you really do? What do you really make? You know, what are your capabilities? What's your past performance? Okay. Did you just set this up yesterday or have you been in business for 100 years? Do you manufacture plastic parts or do you do landscaping? Just tell me quick. Okay. Because I'm not going to read it. Okay, I'm going to evaluate you pretty quickly on what I see. So tying this together also helps the business pull together their thoughts on this customer. You know, what do they really want? What do I have? And it brings it together in a tight package. Next page. So we got down to on the title, it says how to win. Got to do it the way the government wants. You need to register and get your certifications. That's what they see of value. We talked a little bit about to make sure that you can be found. If you can't be found, they're gonna lose it, right? Not lose it. They're going to stop looking. Why? There's a lot of competition. So if I'm looking for a landscaping company, how many do you think there are that I have to choose from, let's say in the Madison area? 30, 50, 100, you know, of all different capabilities, of all different, but if I can't make a quick determination on you, I'll probably go to the next one. Something very important too is that businesses do their market research. You know, what does the government buy? what did they buy, what are they buying, and what will they be buying? Okay, what's the history, what's the current condition, and what are they planning to buy? So if I'm a landscaper and I see that in Madison or Dane County, that landscaping was, there was $1 million worth of landscaping over the last year, and I see that there's a couple opportunities out there now, and then I see that they're doing new construction and building a whole university complex, there's an opportunity for a landscaping company, right? But if I'm, let's say, I don't know, if I see no construction going on, if I see no opportunities, maybe that's not where I look. I look to the bases, I look elsewhere. Maybe it's not a market I go after. Homework is very important here. You also need to know who your competitors are. Remember how we talked about earlier how the government, if you're in the government marketplace, it's a lot more transparent than the commercial marketplace. So I can look up to see who's won past contracts. I can look up to see who's registered in SAM. I can look up to see who's in this SBA database. I can see who's playing in this sandbox, okay? Also, I can look for partners, right? So if I'm a small landscaping company and I need someone that can do saw concrete, to clear an area, I can go find someone in these databases. So I can also look for partners. And remember, some government work, whether it's federal, state, or local, might be larger than what I have the capacity or capability to do. You'll see a lot of partnering, a lot of joint ventures, a lot of teaming in the government marketplace, people working together to go after something bigger. Also to consider being a subcontractor. So if you're looking and you see new buildings are going up, target, who are the primes that are going to go after that construction and start going after them for those opportunities. Next slide. It's also very important that when, if you're going to go after a new market segment, you don't want to throw your resources out the window. It's very important, I think, to do your homework, sit down with your team or outside, whatever, and come up with a market strategy or capture plan. It's going to, resources aren't just money or consultants, right? It's your time, it's your energy. If you go after the government, that means you're not going after another market. So you really should plan this out well, and you should take a look at your return on your investment, not just near term, but also long term. It's very important to understand where the money is here. If the government is not going to invest in infrastructure or construction, and you're a construction company, this may not be the route to go right now. But if you see that in the next budgets in 2-3 years, they're going to be starting to spend money there, it might be worth starting to get involved in that market and start to become aware of where the money is going to be spent. In this market too, relationships are very important. It's a big loss right now not to be able to do conferences, not to be able to go to DC and go meet with people at the agencies, or go to, meet with buyers in Madison, or, there's no interchange. There's no, on the federal side especially, the Navy has a conference, the Army has a conference. We just did a virtual construction and infrastructure conference. I was moderating one of the segments. And in the chat room, I could see people saying hi to each other that usually see each other at this conference and keep their relationships going, find out where the money is being spent, who's planning what, and who's thinking what, and who's in trouble and who's not. All that's gone. So as this starts changing, the relationship building is critical, because even though you're bidding on, something that, okay, it's only price-based, and you submit your bid and you win or no win based on price, the knowledge that you have in order to prepare your bids, the knowledge that you have of current and future projects on where you can fit in, is critical to being successful here. And there's a lot of money on the government side, and like I said, the government has not shut down through all this. If not, it's spending more. It's very important to interact, to attend events, even if it's virtual, so you can keep aware of who the leaders are, who are the decision makers, who has the pocketbook, what they're seeing for future spend. And you need to have your marketing materials in place. I see a lot of companies come talk to us I'll ask them for their capability statement, what they want to sell, they're not ready. So if they go out and meet with somebody and someone checks them out after their meet, or they're not going to see anything. So they need to be prepared before they go into this, and they need to be prepared to sell, whatever that means in whatever setting that is, whether it's preparing a proposal, whether it means bidding a price, whether it means coming up with a teaming member and going after something, or being a subcontractor. It's important to get these relationships going. And in this market, people know each other and they talk. They take different jobs throughout their careers. They go up the ladder, and you'd be amazed who you run into 10 years afterwards. You know, they used to be just somebody at the state of Wisconsin. Now they're someone doing the procurement for certain goods and services, or someone that was at the VA hospital now has an office in DC at the VA. It's very important to keep good relationships and developing relationships if you're going to go into this market, because you'll see your pool of people growing and your knowledge growing as this market expands for you. Next. So just want to share, you know, we do a lot of education. So we have sessions coming up on some of the topics I mentioned. We have some coming up on cyber, on women-owned businesses, on veteran, on hub zones. All this is free. You know, we have a session coming up on sources, thought, and capability statements. We invite you guys to join us for those sessions. Got a great staff of knowledgeable people. All of our staff have either been our ex-government or ex-prime contractor employees and are very knowledgeable in this whole space. Next slide. We also have, we usually have a 2-day event at the end of June at Volk Field with Volk Field and Fort McCoy. Well, this year that it ain't happening. So what we decided to do is we split the baby, and we're doing a virtual session on the 24th, and we moved the in-person other day to October. So anyone that's a current contractor, especially this is going to have more of a federal focus. We have the base, the Fort McCoy, Volk Field National Guard speaking. We have DOD speaking. We have you know, if anyone's interested, look at our website for the details. We're adding some additional speakers this afternoon that have confirmed. There's money to be, you know, there's contracts that are going to be let, but requirements are going to have to be kept. We have the new DOD, DCMA cyber people speaking out of Fort Lee. So there's a lot to be learned here. Again, this session is more for existing or serious contractors. Next slide, please. We do have 3 offices, or we will reopening as the environment allows. We're at the MATC West Campus. We're at Feed Kitchen and at the Latino Chamber of Dane County. So we have, next slide, we have 3 individuals that support those offices, and we welcome you to contact them and sit down with them, or start virtually if that's appropriate. Next slide. Questions?
At this time, if anyone wants to take themselves off of mute to ask a question, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, you can also type it into chat, and I'd be happy to ask on your behalf. I think the one question we did get is if you are open to sharing your slides with the group after.
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Perfect. I mean, they just must be all ready to dive in.
It's a good market to have and keep as part of your portfolio. We never encourage more than, you know, you see some defense contractors that are 100%, but 30, 35%, it's a very, you know, you see what's happened these last months. The government keeps buying, whereas some of the commercial entities just aren't. So it's a good customer.
We did get one question that popped into chat. Where is the Wisconsin Procurement Office in Door County?
It's a virtual office, and I can provide that information to somebody, or if they ask, I can send it to you, Kristen, and
sure. Yep,
you would
I'd be happy to forward it off.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I will pop
That's
up
my
your
contact information.
information here in case if anyone wants to write that down to
Thank you.
send some questions later. I know sometimes you have to sit on things and then they come to you later like, oh, I should have asked this.
Well, and I want to make sure what we do has we don't charge. There's no cost to using our services. We are funded by the Defense Department and the state. So our services are at no cost, and we're happy to meet with anybody, either again virtually or as the office is open, going forward.
Perfect. Well, then I will just plug a few upcoming chamber events. So we do next week, Tuesday, excuse me, have a business boost session kind of centered around recruiting, which is probably shifted a little bit for a lot of us during COVID and how that changes. So Laura Mail from Lyft Consulting will be doing that session for us on Tuesday morning. And we do have Get Moving Middleton, which is scheduled for the second Thursday in July. So July 9th. I know that date went out wrong in today's newsletter. So it is July 9th if anyone is interested in joining. So thank you again to our sponsors, for Aina for taking time out of your schedule to be here with our membership, and to, again, all of our sponsors here. We appreciate their support of the chamber as well. So we can stay on for a few minutes, but otherwise, I wish everyone a great day. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.